Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next talk. One I'm very excited about, and very excited about this coming conversation. Before I introduce the next guest, who has a lot to say and a lot of experience to share, I just want to let everyone know that let's keep this a conversation between friends. So if you have any comments or want to participate, put it in the chat, and we'll address them as we go live. We won't wait until the end. So keep it coming, and we'll be more than happy to address them. So today we're going to learn about how best to use influencers and brand partnerships to build your brand. And we have none other than Denee joining us. Marie is the creator of the digital plus-size medium platform, the Curvy Fashionista. With over 11 years of prior retail and management experience, Marie often is sought after for her industry knowledge, marketing expertise, and the ins and outs of plus-size fashion. As an industry vet, she has received many honors, including the Roots 100's list of the most influential African Americans, the Network Journal's Top 40 Under 40, and BET's Future 40 Award. So she knows what she's talking about. Marie, we're so happy to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. I'm really excited.
I think I'm more excited because when I started diving in, I found a whole bunch of fascinating stuff that you've done, and I can't wait to dive in. So let's dive in. I think we're going to split this conversation into two. We'll talk about influencer marketing and how to leverage that, and then we'll talk about brand partnership next. So let's just understand a bit more about you first. Can you tell us a bit about yourself in your own words and share a bit about the Curvy Fashionista, how you started it, why you started it, and what the mission is today?
Yeah, when I started the Curvy Fashionista, it was a total accident. Didn't mean for it. I was finishing up my MBA program. I wanted to open up a boutique. That's what I wanted. And I wanted to use the Curvy Fashionista as this marketing tool, because at that time, that's what blogs were used for, or introduced as. And so I ended up losing my job. I started it and I lost my job in 2009, Friday the 13th in March 2009, right peak of that, the whole, when the economy was downturning, retail was the first to be hit. And I was like, okay, wait, I think there's something here. A brand had sent me a shirt, a piece of clothing to review. And I was like, this is a transaction. I'm not really sure what kind of transaction this is, because that's how foreign it was. And I realized, you know what, let's try to make something of this. And so what initially was started as a place where I would share and gather other brands that cater to the plus size market evolved into this media platform where we were writing, doing videos, interacting, educating, informing, and hopefully empowering other plus size women when it comes to their plus size lifestyle.
And so what is the Curvy Fashionista now? Is it? Yeah, I know you have the Instagram page with tons of followers. Is that where it lives and breathes? Or?
Oh no. Yeah. So the curvyfashionista.com is our home, and that is the where you'll read articles. You'll learn about the newest designers, the newest partnerships and collaborations, and even more lifestyle conversation around body politics. Entertainment, even some of those op-ed type of pieces around some of our favorite TV shows and what they've missed when it comes to the plus size consumer. So the curvyfashionista.com is our home, and our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest are just extensions of that community.
Great, and that leads to my next question. So you've got the strong Instagram page, and you and your personal brand have a strong Instagram page of 60,000 plus followers. How do you leverage those channels to build the business, and how do you decide what gets pushed out where and what purpose each channel has?
Well, I'm a nerd first and foremost. So for me, I had gotten my MBA in marketing, and for me, it was important to follow where my customers were, where the readers were, or to best control that flow for them, right? And how they receive information, how they're getting it. So I early on assigned different personalities or different types of attributes to each channel. So for example, Facebook tends to be a little bit more conservative than Instagram. I can put the same picture on both pages and have very night and day responses. It's hilarious. But I also now know, okay, if I want to have this type of edgier, bolder, sexier, whatever type of content, we'll share those images more so on Instagram. And then on Facebook, we may present it in a different way where, more people can, I guess, digest it. And so it just really depends on, it's important to know your audiences and to know those attributes of your audience on those specific platforms.
And utilize that accordingly. Got it. So let's dive in a bit about influencer marketing. I think if we were speaking maybe even a year ago, we would have conversations around what that is and what makes someone an influencer. I think generally we're all up to date there. But I'm interested to know, why would a business use an influencer, and what are the benefits of that as opposed to other sort of growth channels?
Right. So, when we kind of look at this word influencer, oftentimes a lot of influencers don't identify themselves as an influencer, or they'll use content creator, they'll use business owner, depending on where they're at in their level of business, right? So it's the identification, how that person identifies themselves. But with a business, why it's important to kind of understand the use of it is because you're tapping into these communities that you would have had to work harder and longer for. You're also tapping into communities that already have a built-in trust network, that have an understanding, that are primed up for you. So when you work with different influencers, it's important to understand what type of communities, what type of audiences that each person has, because that's going to determine your marketing strategy and what's missing and what you need to do on your own versus what this influencer can help you with.
So I work in marketing at Fiverr. We work a lot with influencers. We see it as a very strong channel. I know a lot of people listening right now, and if you are listening, drop some questions, ask anything personal to you, take advantage of this time with Marie. But Marie, at what stage should you say my business is ready for influencer marketing and using influencers? And should people be intimidated by this? Should you be spending on other channels before you reach influencers? How do you know when you're ready for that?
I think it really it boils down to relationships. So I interface often with a lot of independent designers, indie business owners, and their budgets are extremely limited. And so when you build relationships and you take the time to learn the community that you're in, you'll also learn which influencers or other media people, platforms, literally work with the small businesses in a different way than they would a traditional mainstream business, or a mainstream brand. So, for example, there are quite a few influencers that I know that don't charge indie designers at all, or they have a preferred rate for them to help them kind of get into the swing of things so they can learn the process and get their feet wet. So while it's easy to be when you're making X dollars, that's when you should start. No, you should start building those relationships now, really getting to understand and identify those thought leaders, because you're having those relationships that'll allow for you to know how to navigate and who to have conversations with, because it's that frank conversation that you're able to really hash out what you can do for what you do have.
Yeah, and just to be very practical here, how do you even begin with that? Would I DM an influencer? Would I find their email? Some influencers are part of agency networks. Where do you start?
I think it's really about like where they are socially and follow how they have specified conversation, right? So, you know, you can't like oftentimes where some people get discouraged is like they're brand new business and they want to go after like the person all the way up there. They send all the emails and there's no responses, or it's you know, so they try to reach there, or they try to put in the comments, hey, we want to work with you. Like there's each person's going to specify. So if you go to someone's Instagram page and it says email, right? Like that button tab says email them. If on Twitter, they may be like, email me, or slide DMs open. Yeah. Like literally follow what that person is saying to get the best response in the easiest way.
Got it. And this is why you're so perfect for this conversation, because you are an entrepreneur and you are a creator and influencer. Tapping into your influencer side, me as a brand, what is the best thing to say to you to like pique your interest?
Well, you know, a lot of times, like, you know, there are brands that we see that we're like, oh my God, look at them. So like these brands are liking posts, leaving honest comments or compliments or feedback and supporting their content before they even jump in to the DMs, right? Or to the inbox. So it's really, when I say about building a relationship, like you're going to like their stuff. Like, I mean, first of all, you should probably follow them because like that's the first thing, right? Just as it's just the responsibility for the influencer DMing a brand or reaching out, they should be following them too. I think what's important is that there is an awareness. And so there are brands that I have followed that I watch how they interact and engage, and they just want to be involved and have like an authentic presence in the community. That is what's really going to stand out for a brand with an influencer. Because we're going to go back to your page. We're going to see if we're going to see if you're leaving comments. We're going to see if you're interacting. We're going to see if you're sharing other influencers' content. We're going to see what your page looks like. It doesn't represent, or does it look like I fit into your page, right? And if it doesn't, and it's an intentional change that you're doing, like you need to lead with that, right? I did see a question. Is that okay, LeBron?
Yeah, go for it. I was going to bring it in, but
yeah. So they're like, how do you figure out pricing for influencers? Is there a standard price? Do you price out individual posts? This is a little bit of like the current shift in the influencer space because it is so arbitrary, or it had been for a while. There is starting to become a little bit of a structure that's kind of set. Loosely, like for every 10,000, 100 per 10,000 followers on Instagram has been an average-ish type of kind of baseline, and then up or down from there depending on the deliverables. It will range as you go more niche into niche markets. Yeah. It will range when you're, if you're going after someone with a large following. So every influencer is going to have their own pricing. Now, here's what not to do.
Okay.
Don't go and tell an influencer, oh, so-and-so only wanted to charge me $100. When the page you're going to has like 200,000 followers, and like, okay, but you came to me and now I'm never going to work with you. Like, first, like it's happened often. And so if you don't understand that rate, ask, okay, what's included in that rate? Okay, what kind of, what can you tell me about your audience? You can ask more questions. And I think that's where people get stuck. They only ask, how much do you charge? They don't ask, what is your audience? What type of content works well? What kind of engagement can we expect? What's your reach? All of those other questions that are just as important to the spend, or that justify the spend. It's important that you ask those follow-up questions just as much as it's going to be for the influencer to ask back to the brand, okay, With my images, you can only share, you cannot use it for ads, you cannot use it for X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah.
So like these are other, these are the responsibilities on both sides. For me particularly, I don't like one-off posts because we are resource and top of funnel. Like it's important that we have a consistent conversation to create awareness and to drive them further down the funnel.
But that's so interesting that you talk about being top of funnel. As a marketer who would want to start investing in influencer marketing, what sort of set some expectations on what sort of metrics should they be looking at for success, and how do you define success, and how do you work with your influencer on achieving that, or your creator on achieving that?
It's going to vary, right? Because everyone's goals are going to be different. So different metrics are going to signal success than others. Like, for example, like this person was like, what do you think about micro influencers? Does the same wisdom apply versus influencers with larger followings? You will find that micro influencers have a higher conversion rate than larger ones, just because that's just like math, right? You're going to have a more engaged audience, like at a smaller range.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you only work with micro influencers or you only want to work. You need to have a mix, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you find your mix because, whether you're dealing with Song of Style or something shoes, like those two like peak. They're two different types of influencers. One drives awareness, one drives sales and conversion. You need both of them. You need that awareness and that conversion. And so it's not one or the other, it's a mix. So when you find that mix, like that's what's going to really help. In terms to answer your question, like how does someone define success with working as an influencer? That is like what you set your goals. Are you going after collecting emails? Are you going for sales? I will say influencers don't guarantee sales. We are not salespeople. We can bring the people to the yard, we can generate awareness, but that last conversion piece is on you.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people think, oh, well, I spent $100 on an influencer, I should have at least $1,000 in sales. Like they create these metrics, and I'm like, where did you get that from? Right. And why would you think that? Like this is part of marketing and advertising. Like you want one for one, like that's a sales team on your side, not on this side. So it's important to understand those two. But metrics, that's like how many, like what was the reach? How long were they on site? How many clicks through to the page or clicks through to the content? You want to think about like those metrics and those numbers, because like that's going to all kind of boil down to what your goal is. Like if you're a new company, you're wanting to collect emails. That's going to be your biggest driver. Yeah. And your content and your goal of making that happen is really going to drive like what type of influencers you choose, whether it be micro or macro. It's going to be like how many you can use. Like, so there are a lot of different things. There's just not one way to work with influencers, or not one way to measure the success of it.
And so I guess the lesson is to be clear with what you want and work closely with your creator in establishing that brief. So we know that influencers have their own voice, and the more you lean into that voice, the more organic the content will be, and people will tend to trust that more. We got a question about, do you set brand guidelines for the influencers to follow, or do you let them reach their audience in their own way? My question to you is, off of that, how do you draw the line so that you make sure that your brand, you come out of that post or video, people knowing what you want them to know, but you still give creative freedom to the influencer?
So to kind of just even set the stage, like when we work with influencers, we're kind of, from a media space, like we're working with brand X and their goal is Y. We then reach out to our network of influencers to help amplify and drive awareness to their goal, right? And so the brand will send over guidelines. Those guidelines are usually like what the brand is, what the motto or the value insight, what their goal is. This could be like imagery or inspiration. Those are things that kind of in that brief, that come up in that brief. For and then like do we let them reach? So yes, you want that influencer to be able to reach out to their audience, taking those things into consideration. You don't want to dictate to the blogger, you need to say this. Don't do that.
Right.
Because that's not in how they speak, that's not in their language, that's not how they communicate, and it will read very inauthentic and it won't do well at all. Yeah. And then you're wondering why it's not converting, because you've taken away the influencer's voice.
Totally. Love it. We have to move on now to talk about partnerships because we're short on time, but I think I could speak to you about this forever. It's just, before we do that, I want to just talk a bit about something that I found online when doing my research about the Cultivate Awards. I read about it on The Cut, Cosmo, a bunch of other places. Maybe just tell us a bit about what it is first, and then we'll dive into it a bit more.
Yeah, so the Cultivate Awards, I wanted to find a way to support our independent designers in the plus size space. So I approached Eloquy, a plus size retailer, asking them to be a partner in the launch of these awards to help really give back to the community. And so I wanted to do it in an impactful way, and I knew at this particular time I couldn't do it by myself. So I really wanted to, for me, what was really important, that these indie designers received resources, business tools, information to really help them move their business forward, to literally cultivate that foundation, you know what I'm saying? So really nurture and develop their business so that they can grow even further, especially since in the plus space, indie designers are like the backbone, and they're the ones who've ushered in plus size fashion's like innovations. With that being said, I approached Eloquy. They appreciated the idea, especially as it's centered around BIPOC designers. And so from there, it's kicked off, and we had our applications. Our applications just closed, and so now like we're whittling down to get down to our finalists.
Great, that sounds great. And so Eloquy was kind of key in setting this up. As a new business, a more established business, how important is it to find these partners to help grow projects, grow your business?
It's always going to come down to relationships, right? Yeah. Relationships and how clearly you can articulate your event's brand messaging or values, and how they align with a brand and their values or their marketing initiatives. So you may work, there's some brands that I work with in different types of ways, but this may not be fitted for them, right? Or I may work with a brand this way and other ways may not work for them. But because of the relationships, we know that about each other. Yeah. So we know that we can present something like, listen, like this is an amazing partnership. Here's why, and here's how, and here's what you can get. And so it was important to know that. And when you have those relationships, it makes it that much easier to do so.
So you just touched on this, but someone who's new to it and trying to launch their business, what's the best way to approach a new partnership? How do you go in for the sale? I mean, let's say you've established that initial relationship. How do you go for it?
Well, I mean, for me, like even though I've been around for a while, so whether you're new or you're years in the game, I'm still doing cold emails or the introduction. So, it's important to understand the brand you're sending it to, where they are positioned, doing some research or homework to understand like what you're pitching them, if it even aligns with their brand and their values and like what they're working on. So, that's the most important. Follow them on their networks. Follow them, subscribe to their newsletter so that you're aware of what's going on with this brand. So when you do approach them, you can be like, hey, I saw this over here. You can recall or relate back to something that is of value, or that shows that you're literally a supporter or a fan of the brand, right? So that, and showing that there's synergy on your end. Then you ask to have a meeting, ask to have a call, present, what you're working on, and seeing if they're interested. And it's really about like, you may be nervous the first couple of times, but like then it becomes fun. You're like, hey, how can we work together? I have this idea, or I'm working on this. I think this would be great if you guys did this.
It sounds like both this and the influencer work, it comes down to relationships and sort of authentic, natural relationships, what's interesting, what's in your ecosystem, and nurturing those, right? Is that
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's so that's going to be the most, and it's important because, like, just like as if you were dating someone, you don't always go for the clothes on the first night. Like, I mean, some people may, but like it's still about developing a whole relationship. It's that process, right? And so, you may not ask for their phone number the first time you see them, but they frequent this X spot. So you get to know them, you laugh at their jokes, you like, oh, I saw that, that's cute, whatever. And then you start having that personal one-on-one conversation, and they're like, oh, this person's kind of cool. And then from there, you develop and nurture that. So it's just like the same with social media. Like, you don't send that first email with the first ask.
right? And that's why it's so different from your sort of typical ads that you'll see on social platforms or on Google. I mean, this is organic. This is more personal. It starts from there. I found out about the Curvy Fashionista cruise. I've got 3 questions for you. What was it? Did you leverage brand partnerships there? And why wasn't I invited?
Well, so I wanted to do, my readers had asked in a live they wanted to go on a cruise. And I was like, really? Like, okay. And so I was like, let me do some research. So we've had like 30 and 50, like respected. We've done it twice, I think, twice. And I think we were getting ready for a third, and Rona said no. And so that was fun. We partnered in different ways, not so much like the whole presentation of it, right? Like on the whole thing. I think if we would have kept going on, that would have been like a next natural step. We did partner with brands in regards to the bags, the welcome tote bags, and what was inside the bags and what they received and how they, so then like people got sunglasses or towels or a tote bag that had like, shiny and purple, and people could walk around and everyone looked the same, or, so that was a different way to connect with our community, a different way to connect with our readership offline, a little bit more deeper. And so like that was something fun, but we're not going to do cruises for a minute, going forward now. So it's like, well, how do we now have fun and create something similar to, but a little bit more destinational than a cruise?
Right. Well, I wanted to invite for whatever that is also.
Okay. Come on down.
So going back to the Cultivate Awards, how do you make sure, it seems like it really is mutually beneficial, this partnership, right? You bring awareness to the brand, you have the audience, they manufacture clothing, they have the opportunity for the line. How do you make sure that your voice is heard in a partnership, that the other brand doesn't kind of swallow the messaging, and that it's right, for both sides?
Right. And so it usually depends on what types of partnerships you have. So like this one, I needed their help on the PR side. So we put that into the agreement, right? So that we were able to generate awareness and visibility about this partnership and about this initiative, and how important it was to help nurture and develop these conversations. So that's where and how, we have that conversation at the beginning, right? Like when they were like, we're in, let's talk about the fine details. That is where you have that conversation and who's going to own what and what this is going to look like on the other side. There are times when I've had my expos and other events where a brand is a sponsor and they send the check and we do the deliverables and send it back to them in a nice little reporting package, right? So that's a little bit different because then we're doing all of the work per se, right?
Right.
And their sponsorship allows us the space to do those events, to produce these experiences for our audience.
So going back to what you said, that really resonated with me. You know, we can bring the awareness, we can bring, we can share the message, but the conversion, that's on you. And so how do you do it? How do you do it as a brand? You've leveraged this opportunity either through a brand partner or through an influencer. You've got the eyeballs, you've got the call to action, you've driven people through. How can a brand take advantage of the spend, of the moment in time, and make sure that they actually hit the goals from the things that they're responsible for?
So they have to be ready, right? That means your website has to be optimized. It needs to be an aesthetically pleasing, trusted, verified, using the SSL security, the design. You know, does it look sketch? Are the pictures all cohesive? You know, there are ways to show the audience or the potential shopper that your site is legit. Yeah. Like that's what you need to have ready. Like if you aren't ready and you drive all this traffic and your site is hella slow and it doesn't load, that's a problem. Or upon load up, like it blasts like some crazy song, like we're clicking off. Or if the images aren't sized and they look all like selfies, or you know, like people are gonna be like, what is this? Like, and then like their price is like $500 for a selfie picture, like of a garment. Like, no. So it's really about making sure that that brand image and experience match up to each other, so that this way the user's experience is consistent down the line. You know, you're gonna have people who, you know, abandon their carts. What kind of software do you have that's like, you know, to recover that cart abandonment? You're gonna have people who just come, they may not want to buy now or they can't buy now. Capture their email. Like, you know, these are ways that you as a brand can take advantage of that awareness. Someone's liking your page, you know, like make sure that you're paying attention to these new people. If they comment or they like, go like their page, go comment on their page. Nurture those relationships, give them their own sense of community within your brand, and turn that person and move that person from a no to like, a like to love. Like, you know, that affinity kind of change. So, and when they're in that like and love space, that's when they're spending money with you.
Got it. Thank you. Going back to the influencer bit a bit, I'm a small business and I'm approaching influencer marketing for the first time. Can you maybe help us a bit in understanding what sort of commitment it takes in order to understand if it's a good channel or not? Should you expect to work with a few people, a mix, like you said, maybe top of funnel and more down the funnel? Can you understand if it's for you after one sort of post with one influencer? Yeah. Can you maybe elaborate a bit on that?
It should be a consistent part of your mix. It's not a one-off. It is a consistent piece of your mix. It's part of the pie, right? So initially it was like a sliver. Now it's an official piece of the pie. You have to have it mixed up and it has to be consistent. You have to set aside like a product budget. You know, not only do you have like a piece of the marketing budget from dollars to be set aside, but you also need to set aside a product budget, right? So you want to make sure that, you know, you're integrating it fully into how you operate your brand, so that this way it has a natural feel and vibe to it that you're constantly, then other influencers become aware, and before you're having to reach out to people, they're going to be coming to you.
And, you know, a difficult question to answer because there's so many influencers, as you said, but I'm starting off, give me a rough budget that I should have in mind for tackling sort of my first bit of influencer, and anything below that, maybe consider waiting until you have that. Or is that an answer question to ask?
I can't answer that question, and I'm going to tell you why. Because like, it's going to literally depend on your mix, your brand, your niche, or your segment that you're in, right? So it's really going to vary. And even if you have $0, you can still find folks to partner with It's just it's going to take a little bit more to actually like, you know, turn that over in a different way. So I would just say that it's important to start building these relationships, understanding the key, like the thought leaders and the tastemakers in your spaces, so that this way you know, okay, who works with indie brands who are just starting out, and who's giving that PR, that awareness, that invest, you know, who are supporting these businesses for, you know, someone like me. Like, you need to think about it that way rather than being like, oh, I ain't got no money. Like, you still have product budget.
Yeah.
You know, so you want to trade that off in some ways, like, you know, and then also understand that not everyone is going to be happy with a T-shirt for $1,000 value piece of content.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, if you can understand that and respect that at the beginning, and you can get that number from you, like, when my budget changes, I definitely will be back. Like, and it's really about respecting the time and not being mad about how someone has set their own boundaries and how they have built and cultivated their own business.
Well, I love that, because it means if anyone listening there now is starting a business and you know, bootstrapping, you can still be looking at influencer marketing. You should be looking at these brand partners. And on the other side, you know, if you have raised something or you are kind of building up your marketing mix, you have a bit more to sort of play with, and it's relevant. We don't have that much more time, so I'm going to end on a question. And if anyone else has questions, we can take one or two. So feel free to drop it in. But last one from me. In the fashion space or otherwise, which brands are utilizing influencers best in your opinion, and what sort of really innovative work has been done by brands and influencers collaboratively?
You know, I've seen so many. Like, it's so hard. Like, I think I couldn't even. I think what's the better way to answer this is, as a brand, as you're trying to figure out, like, you know, what is a good way, like, look at some of these brands' hashtags. Because oftentimes when there are campaigns, like, the brand will attach a hashtag so you can see everyone else who's, like, involved in this campaign, to be inspired and to look and see, like, how they're doing it. The reason why it's hard for me to give a very specific answer is because, like, there's so much happening right now, and so much changing that, and we're at the top of a change of a season. So like right now, like, it's like it dipped, and now we're starting to see more. So, you know, I think that's like the big challenge there.
Okay, got it. But great feedback. Marie, can you tell us where to follow you, how to keep track of everything you're doing, and if you want to kind of share anything else?
You can follow me at thecurvyfashionista.com. You can follow us on Instagram at thecurvyfashionista, or you can follow me at Marie Denee. You can email us, info@thecurvyfashionista. We're also on Instagram, Pinterest and Twitter, TCF Style. And from there, like, you know, if you have questions, want to talk more, like, don't hesitate to reach out to any of those places.
Great. Thank you very much for your time, your knowledge.
Oh my God.
I learned a lot. And yeah, it was really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you kindly.